Hi guys, so I wanted to make this video about PTSD because not much is ever spoken about PTSD, and whenever it is, it's usually in terms of veterans. Same with the resources that are out there for people with PTSD. And it's great to talk about veterans that have PTSD, and it's great to have resources for them, but anybody can have PTSD. All it takes to have PTSD is going through a traumatic event. It's just your brain's way of dealing with it and coping with what happened to you that was traumatic. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about PTSD and some things that people often don't realize about it. The first thing I wanted to talk about is flashbacks. So a lot of people, when they think of a flashback, they think that the person fully always thinks that they're back in that time that the traumatic event is happening, that they are not aware of their surroundings, not aware of the date and time and things of that matter. And those type of flashbacks do in fact happen for people with PTSD. That's 100% a thing. However, that's not always how flashbacks appear. Sometimes there's emotional flashbacks, or there's more like cognitive flashbacks, so like where people keep going in and out of that time period, where people just keep seeing flashing images of like the traumatic event in their head that they can't get rid of and things of that nature. It's not always full on. They think that they're back there at the traumatic event, although that can happen as well. A lot of mental disorders are more of a spectrum, and so they can range in severity, and flashbacks also can range in severity. Same with nightmares. Sometimes people have full-on nightmares where they completely relive the event, while other times they have more dreams that might have something to do with their trauma, but it's not full-on like they're having a nightmare directly about the trauma. It's more of in an indirect way. Or they have night terrors, which is where somebody wakes up in a sweat and out of breath, and they realize that they've had a bad dream, but they can't remember the bad dream. So it's not always that they are having a nightmare directly about the event that happened. Another common misconception that people have about PTSD is that as long as the person is not directly involved with anything similar to like their trauma, that like the trauma is not going to affect them, that it won't trigger the PTSD symptoms. And for a lot of people, that's not how it works. For example, if somebody has childhood trauma, anything that reminds them of their childhood at all could remind them of the trauma. It doesn't have to be something directly related to the trauma. So for example, like a childhood TV show, childhood music that they used to listen to, any type of smell, because like your sense is the thing in your brain that's closest to memory. So sense are most likely to bring back a memory than any of the other senses. It could be a smell, it could be the way that somebody looks. Like I know sometimes people with PTSD describe seeing like their abuser's face when they look at other people, even somebody that looks nothing like them. It could be somebody of a different race. It could be somebody that like does not resemble their abuser at all, but at their corner of their eye they thought they saw them. Like it affects every part of somebody's life, and a lot of people might not realize that. They might think that if you just go about your day and nothing is similar to what happened the day of your abuse, that nothing's going to remind you of it. But it could be something as simple as the foods that you eat is like a food that you used to eat during the time period that the trauma happened. It can be things like that. Trauma can be very complex, and that's why it's important that we need to differentiate between complex PTSD and maybe like regular PTSD. Both are very serious, but they can vary in the complexity of them and how often the trauma happened. If it happened all throughout the childhood, there could be a lot of different reminders, for example, that remind the person on a daily basis of the trauma. Another thing not spoken about enough about PTSD is hyper versus hypoarousal. A lot of people think that you have to have one or the other if you have PTSD, and that you always are either hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, where you're not aroused enough, you're aroused too much. They think you either have to be unable to control your emotions, unable to regulate them, or either like be completely cold and callous and not able to regulate them at all, when oftentimes with people with PTSD it switches between the two of them. Sometimes they might be completely numb to their emotions and kind of feel more distant from them, dissociate from them, while other times it might seem like they have more emotional regulation issues where their emotions are like up and down. It really just depends on the person, but it can go either way. And I feel like a lot of times when people think about PTSD, they think it's like one or the other. The last thing I want to say about PTSD is there's still this notion to this day, even though it's 2025, that people can just get over the trauma, that like it doesn't have a lasting effect on them, they just need to move on, things like that. The studies have shown time and time again that it affects your whole entire body. It can cause a lot of physical health problems. It completely changes your brain chemistry. It's not as simple as just somebody getting over it. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a serious mental health disorder. And so if you know somebody who has PTSD, please try to be there for them. know what their triggers are, if they're comfortable sharing it, and how to help them with it, and be supportive, and don't think that they can just like get over it, because if it was that simple, again, it wouldn't be a thing. This is how people cope with things that have happened to them. Have a great day, and I hope you learned a little bit about PTSD. Thank you.